Hi, welcome back to the basement. I'm Steve Lewis. Today it's my pleasure to talk about side 2 of one of my personal all-time favorite Beach Boy albums, Little Deuce Coupe. There's a lot to get to, so let's get started right away with the first track on side 2, Shutdown. Shutdown was a song that had already been made available 3 times in 1963. In the spring, it had been the B-side of the Surfin' USA single and on the Surfin' USA album, and it had been released in June '63 on Capitol's Shutdown compilation. Despite the fact that most Beach Boy fans would already own at least one copy of it, it is undeniably a great way to kick off the second side of this album. We talked about it extensively in episode 83 about Surfin' USA. We won't go into it here, so let's move on to the second track, Brian Wilson and Roger Christian's Spirit of America. We discussed the subject of the song, Craig Breedlove's record-setting run on the Bonneville Salt Flats on August 5th, 1963, in other episodes. You can check it out in episode 55, Bruce Goes Drag Strip, and in episode 98, U.S. Pop Culture 1963 Part 2. Suffice to say that Breedlove caught the pioneering spirit of the times. Driving a fast car had been the province of juvenile delinquent punks. Breedlove, instead, was seen as a trailblazer on the new frontier, almost like one of the Mercury astronauts. And it's not surprising that Brian and Roger Christian would want to memorialize his run in song. I've got to hand it to Roger Christian for getting the details right, too. Rock songs about historical events are usually somewhere between overly simplistic and flat-out factually wrong. Christian correctly recounts the highlights, the details. He does it all in inspiring words and very musical verses. And he tackles the subject obliquely. It's an interesting choice. I think most writers would have talked about the run itself. He was coming down the flats doing 407. Something like that, which would have been in the classic American blues, folk, and country tradition. Instead, he treats it more like a neoclassical artist would. Neoclassical painters like Jacques-Louis David find the drama in the moments just before or just after the main action. Socrates about to drink the cup of hemlock, the Horatii about to go out into battle. Christian's lyrics take us to the moment right before the main action. The man and machine had given fair warn. They'd set a new record on that warm August morn. Now, I doubt that Christian was thinking of it in exactly those terms, but he clearly knows how to find the drama in the subject and highlight it from a sophisticated and subtle perspective that gives it power. This is one case where I definitely prefer car lyrics to something more universal and conventional like a love song. As a love song, I think it would be cute and the power would be diminished. At the very least, these lyrics are much more interesting. The song itself is beautiful and features one of my all-time favorite Brian Wilson falsettos. I can never get enough of the way he sings an auto in An Airplane and Auto. A great full doo-wop vocal arrangement really gives it strength, and saxes, of course, are an integral part of doo-wop, and they're here too, but they don't honk. Rather, they come off more like a military brass band with a doo-wop edge. Stylistically, it's similar to the Ballad of Old Betsy, which sadly is Betsy's loss. As enjoyable a track as that is, it looks kind of shabby next to Spirit of America. Spirit of America is a great track and one of my all-time favorite Beach Boy records. Next up is Our Car Club, written by Brian and Mike and previously available on the Surfer Girl album. We discussed this track in depth back in episode 100, Surfer Girl Side 2, so you can check it out there. For a guy working on his third album of 1963, and despite having to draw on earlier work and other projects, Brian clearly still had something left in the tank, as evidenced by No Go Showboat, another co-write with Roger Christian. I've read a lot of quotes from musicians talking about what a unique and innovative composition No Go Showboat is, and I can't really expound on what's innovative about its structure and chord sequence, but there is no doubt that No Go Showboat has a fresh sound. The tight instrumental track races along, kind of ironically for a No Go Showboat. And to go for the apt pun, you've got the instrumentalists and vocalists firing on all cylinders. Mike and Brian trade leads, with Brian's falsetto once again being the highlight and sounding absolutely delightful. I feel like gravity lifts a little bit as soon as he launches into the first line of the first verse. I've got a wild custom that wins every show. The instrumental break with the saxophone and hand clap seems designed just to provide a little break so that it'll feel really good when they go into that third verse with Brian singing, "The engine compartment's filled with all chrome goodies," and I'm so glad they're going to do it one more time. Roger Christian's lyrics are great. They're clever and funny and built around his usual dense use of hot rodding terms. When it comes to Speed Man, I'm just out of luck. I'm even shut down by the ice cream truck. The title has come in for a lot of criticism. With a name like No Go Showboat, you expect a throwaway, not an album highlight. And I know my friends and I made a lot of fun of that title when we first became aware of the album during high school. As it is, I've grown to look at it as one of those quirky things that I love about Beach Boy albums. According to comments from Rich Alarian, also known as Rich Peterson, relayed in Becoming the Beach Boys, No Go Showboat was one of the songs he co-wrote with Brian, taking Brian's help with the Survivors in place of a songwriting credit. Alarian says he helped with the words. Since Roger Christian is credited on this one, it would be really interesting to see Christian's original lyrics and how they were changed. The Timers recorded a version of No Go Showboat on October 11, 1963, just 4 days after the Little Deuce Coupe album hit the shops, and released it as a single shortly thereafter. The Timers were another of Gary Usher's numerous 1963 projects, and their version reportedly features Brian on backing vocals. Their version is a little more elaborate than the Beach Boys version, being a single A-side. To me, the vocal sounds a little less assured than the Beach Boys, and the voices don't blend as well. Otherwise, it's not too far from what the Beach Boys did with it. The second to last song on the album, A Young Man Is Gone, features the tune Their Hearts Were Full of Spring with new lyrics by Mike Love. Their Hearts Were Full of Spring sounds like an old folk song, something along the lines of Barbara Allen. In reality, it was written by Bobby Troup, best known as the writer of Route 66. And of course, we all remember Route 66 as the pre-interstate route that winds from Chicago to LA, more than 2,000 miles all the way. It goes through St. Louis, Joplin, Missouri, Oklahoma City looks ooh so pretty. You'll see Amarillo, Gallup, New Mexico, Flagstaff, Arizona, don't forget Winona, Kingman, Barstow, San Bernardino. Troup had helped launch Julie London's singing career in the mid-50s and produced her debut album, Julie Is Her Name, in 1955, which featured the million-selling #9 hit, Cry Me a River. Some of you might remember Cry Me a River from London's performance of the song in the 1956 rock and roll movie, The Girl Can't Help It, or from Joe Cocker's version, which went to #11 in 1970. Troup and London married in 1959. Julie London had been married to actor, producer, director Jack Webb from 1947 to 1953. In the 70s, Webb hired Troup and London for his TV series Emergency, where they portrayed Dr. Joe Early and Nurse Dixie McCall. The song had first been released as the B-side of Jimmie Rodgers' #1 hit Honeycomb in 1957, a solo vocal with acoustic guitar, some rather screechy strings, and a subtle vocal chorus. Troup seemingly released his own version shortly thereafter, though I've had trouble figuring out what record it was on. His version is an extremely gentle jazz solo vocal with mainly acoustic guitar backing. The song was the A-side of the Lettermans' first record in 1960. This and a second single for Warner Brothers flopped in 1960. They found success, of course, after moving to Capitol in 1961. The Beach Boys version is based on the Four Freshmen from their 1961 album, Freshman Year. The Beach Boys have performed it with the original lyrics many times over the years, as it's a great showcase for their harmonies. It was performed by the Beach Boys on the Andy Williams Show in the spring of 1965, the Big Sur Folk Festival in October 1970, on ABC's 2020 news program on October 2nd, 1980, and at Ronald Reagan's second inaugural gala on January 19th, 1985. Mike's Beach Boys were performing it occasionally, at least as recently as 2017. A 1969 live version was released on the Live in London album, and a studio version from 1967 was released on the Smiley Smile Wild Honey Twofer CD in 1990. The lyrics were unhip for teenagers and unsuitable for a Beach Boy album in 1963. Mike Love rewrote them, of course, as a tribute to James Dean, who died on September 30th, 1955, in a catastrophic auto accident in his Porsche 550 Spyder. These lyrics transform it into an early 60s teen tragedy song, albeit one based on a true incident, and give it enough of a car connection to make it suitable for this album. I always found it a little off that he rhymes cause with cause, and it's particularly jarring because it's the last rhyme in the song. As with the original version, A Young Man Is Gone serves primarily as a showcase for the Beach Boys' harmonies, which are exquisite and flawless. I particularly like the part that begins For This Daring Young Star. The final track on the album is Custom Machine. Once again, the Beach Boys refused to close an album on a down note, so A Young Man Is Gone is followed by something more upbeat. I'm guessing that this song was chosen because it's the most straightforward and representative of the Cars songs. All of the first 3 Beach Boy albums closed with a weak track. It's a tradition that they would continue at least through Beach Boys today, and it's no different here, although weak is a relative thing. Apart from Betsy, it's probably the least distinguished of the new tracks, but it's still fun. It's got a lot of nice hooks in it, and it's a really enjoyable track, probably the strongest thing that they would close an album with until Summer Days and Summer Nights. Lyrically, instead of speed, this one emphasizes the way the car looks. The interesting thing about these lyrics is the question of who wrote them. The track was credited to Brian only, but these don't sound like any lyrics Brian would have written. Mike Love was added to the credits after his lawsuit in 1994, but these don't really sound like Mike Love lyrics either. It sounds like it could be Roger Christian, but he's not credited. From what I've been able to find, it appears that this is another song that Rich Alarian co-wrote with Brian in exchange for his help on the Survivor single. Mike gets a great lead vocal showcase here, and I like the boogie woogie piano break in the middle. It's an extremely enjoyable track, worthy of inclusion, though like Betsy, it suffers just a little bit by comparison to some of the other new tracks here. To promote the album, Capitol sent a 1-sheet pamphlet of Tom Medley hot rod jargon to record stores and disc jockeys. They were making sure that everybody was up on the new hot rod craze. This is another one of those cool and seemingly unattainable collectibles today. The album would peak at number 4 on the chart on February 8, 1964. The 3 albums ahead of it were The Singing Nun in her 10th and final week at number 1, In the Wind by Peter, Paul and Mary, which had been number 1 for 5 weeks in November 63, and at number 2 behind The Singing Nun for the 10 weeks since then, and at number 3 an album by a new rock combo from England, Meet the Beatles. The day after this chart was published, on Sunday, February 9th, 1964, the Beatles would make an appearance on the popular Ed Sullivan Show before an estimated television audience of 73 million. The next week would find the Little Deuce Coupe album still at number 4 for a second and final week, with The Singing Nun and In the Wind dropping to 2 and 3 respectively, and Meet the Beatles jumping to the number 1 spot. Of course, that's a discussion for another time, and we'll talk about that when we get into 1964 pop culture in a future episode. As for the Little Deuce Coupe album, if I have one complaint, it's that the era went by too fast. Obviously, big changes were coming, and the Beach Boys needed to grow and roll with them, but personally, I could have done with a few more Spirits of America and No-Go Showboats first. Of course, there were more great records right around the corner, including probably the greatest car-related song the Beach Boys ever recorded, but as 1963 moved into 1964, it must have been especially clear that things would never really be the same again. As it is, we can always revisit those days for the 25 minutes and 25 seconds of pure joy that is the Little Deuce Coupe album. Hope you enjoyed this. I look forward to your comments. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done that. I always appreciate it. We will see you next time when we'll move on to another era and other things. Thanks. Bye.